just to make sure everybody's on the same page, we are going to go through the Recovery Coaching in the Emergency Department TOT program. Has everybody gotten their trainer's materials in the mail? Okay, Ryan, do me a favor at the end of this, email me your mailing address. I'm not sure why you haven't received it yet, and then we'll just make sure that we put a copy in the mail to you. And what I'll do is I will send it priority so that you'll have it. Oh, okay, that could be why. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start with the agreement that we have all of our CART trainers sign for each of the activities that we have you training for us. So before we move into the curriculum, let me cover a couple of things. So what does it mean to be a CART trainer? So obviously we are thrilled that you've chosen to complete the TOT program to become an authorized trainer of this specific curriculum. The other piece about this is that this training will give you an overview of planning the logistics, so scheduling a training, understanding how to order manuals, things such as that, as well as understanding the curriculum itself so that you can train it. Our goal is to make sure that you have all your questions answered regarding the content so that when you are able to train it and when you go to train it, you'll be able to train it in the same manner as you were trained in. And regardless of where this training is presented, we want everybody to experience the same thing. We want everybody to get the same content. We want the training to be delivered with the same intention. And so we just want to make sure that we're always maintaining fidelity to the program. Now, Ryan, what I will also do is send you the trainer's agreement. But this webinar will go through all of the points. And so if you have any questions, we can communicate after. So the trainer agreement that I sent to you all outlines what we expect from trainers of this specific curriculum and what you can expect from us. And so we understand that this time is limited, and I know we're doing this through a webinar-based program. So please know that any questions can be typed up in the chat box. I will stop and ask for questions. Please feel free to use that in order to have a dialogue back and forth. But know if there's anything that you think of after this webinar, feel free to reach out to me. We do have a main CART phone number, which is 860-218-9553, or you can always email us. We have a main email address, which is CART, CART@ccard.us, or my email address is stacy@ccard.us. And so the one thing that I will ask is that once we go through all the points of the trainer agreement, if you can just go through, fill out that information and get it back to me. You may email it to me, scan it, take a picture, send it to me that way. If you want to put it into snail mail, feel free to do that. I will send you all an email after this webinar is over with the link and all the instructions for getting that back. So the first point of the trainer's agreement states that you're free to use this training curriculum. Once you've gone through the main training, which is what you all attended in person here in Connecticut, or we did have a training in Michigan, we have people then go through the TOT program. Because we were still piloting this curriculum, obviously we didn't have a TOT program immediately following, which is why we're doing it in this forum. So people didn't have to come all the way back to Connecticut. But the whole point of the TOT is to really, again, go through, make sure you understand how to schedule a training, order manuals, and to make sure that you understand how to deliver it. So because this is something that we've been piloting for the last few months. We are pretty confident at this point that this training in the TOT is ready, with no other edits, no other things that we need to shift on it. So we want to make sure that you have always the latest and greatest, and this will be the process that you go to train this specific curriculum. If you wanted to train one of our other curriculums, if you're not a trainer already, you would need to go through that particular training and the TOT component for it. So this gives you the freedom to use the recovery coaching in the emergency department training curriculum. We would ask that you please use the official title of this training program when promoting and consistently referencing CCAR as the originator and the creator. We ask that you refrain from including terms that change the title, like peer, support, specialist, things such as that. Because this and every one of our training curriculums is part of a nationally recognized program, changing the title might confuse some people, especially when they get the manual and it says CCAR on it, Recovery Coaching in the Emergency Department. As well, they're going to get a certificate that states that they've gotten 12 hours of CEUs from CCAR in the specific title. So if you decide to change and make different titles and things such as that, some of your folks might be a little confused as to what they're attending. So we just want to make sure that anytime you advertise, you're advertising it with the full title of this program. We would like for you to use the curriculum in its entirety and deliver it as a whole in the order specified. Obviously, every day of the CCAR trainings kind of build on the last section and go forward. And so this training is no different. It is a 12-hour training, and so we would like you to deliver it in the order that it is laid out in the manual. You'll see that each manual is set up as to a day 1 and a day 2. If you decide to break up the day into half-day sections and things such as that, that's fine. But just know that the manual will always be set up as full-day sections. And we'd ask that if you have any questions about scheduling or changing or altering the schedule, that you speak with us first to get some assistance. You may or may not charge people to attend this training, and the reason why we say that is because we understand that there are different funding sources out there. Some people are doing things with grant money. Some people are able to have an agency pay for space and manuals. And so we completely understand that it's really hard to make a bar that states you should at least charge this amount of money, when we know that with grant funding and things there may not be a need to charge. However, please note that the fee to CCAR for your manuals doesn't change regardless of what you charge for your training. We also ask you not undervalue the training. This is a highly respected curriculum that awards CEUs, and you should charge what the market will bear for a training of this caliber. We have seen where people, just to do a training, will actually, not charge anything or just charge for the fee of the manual. And we find that the quality of the training goes down because people just don't have the buy-in for it. At this point, we really need people to be in, understanding that they're getting 12 hours of CEUs and they need to attend the full 12 hours in order to receive that. CCAR asks that you inform us as to the date, location, and number of people trained. We keep a record of every training and ask trainers to inform us of logistical details through a training request form, which is available on our website. As well, there is one on the CD that I sent you. This form needs to be completed and returned for all trainings you schedule with us. Occasionally, we will hit milestones of number of people trained, which in turn help you to market the training. The other piece is that in our database, we keep a set record of who trains and when. And at this point, we want to make sure that everybody has we have all the information of who's training, when you can when you're training, so that if people contact us to let us know that they couldn't print out their certificate and things such as that, we can go to our database and have the information in order to look them up and see if we can figure out when they attended. So it's really important to get that information to us so that we can use it for database purposes and also for record keeping, things such as that. All manuals must be purchased from CCAR. You cannot duplicate the manual. The EDRC manual is no exception. All manuals are copyrighted, and duplicating the manual is prohibited and could result in your losing your status as an authorized trainer of the curriculum. The cost of the manual does include shipping. However, we expect notice of an upcoming training in 7 to 10 business days. If an order comes in later than that, you may be subject to additional shipping charges, and we will work with you in a printer to arrive at the best rate to ship a late order. We really try to make sure when we ask you all to send us your trainer request form, things such as that, that we get it at least 2 to 3 weeks, so we do have that 7 to 10 business days to get it to you. Sometimes things happen with UPS. That's typically who they use to send the manuals, and sometimes things happen. Or let's say you're going to be doing a training in a different state, and sometimes the ground shipping takes a little bit longer. If you're on the East Coast, it could take 2 to 3 days. If you're on the West Coast, it could take up to 5. So it's really important that we have that information as soon as we can in order to make sure that we have enough time to get you what it is that you need. The other piece just to make you aware of is that this training manual, the EDRC training manual, is $30. And again, that does include shipping. On the CD that was sent, you have a copy of PowerPoint slides, and we provide those with your trainer manual so that you always have the most recent curriculum to train. We understand that you may need to customize the presentation. You may have to add slides or hide others, but please don't make alterations that affect the actual curriculum. At this point, there may be pieces that you want to explain to a specific group of people, like let's say you have to do a trainings for a specific agency, and let's say they have a policy that they want you to include or follow. At that point, you may want to provide them with that information on a particular slide, or maybe you want to add a thank you slide to a sponsor that's sponsoring, or an agency that's giving you free space or free coffee. Anything such as that. That's what we're talking about needing to customize the presentation. But again, those things don't really affect the delivery of the curriculum, and so we hope that's where people understand the difference. Also, we have our CART and CCAR logos on our slides. At this point, we do know that some people want to include their logos and things, but then it looks like you're an author of the slide. Please save adding logos from different agencies to a title slide or a thank you slide, because at this point it makes it seem like that agency also participated in the creation of this curriculum. We ask that you provide a list of your participants that you trained so we can add them to our database. On the CD that I've sent, we've included a simple Excel spreadsheet. Again, with the record keeping and with that database, we take that sign-in sheet that you send us, whether it's faxed in, a picture taken, whatever it is, to verify attendance if somebody forgets to do their evaluation. It's really important that we have those sheets. We can't verify that somebody's completed it without it. At this point as well, we also send that simple Excel spreadsheet in an email to you when we send you your evaluation link. So you have 2 methods of having it. It's on your CD, or when Lizanne sends you your reminder email with your evaluation sheet, you'll have that Excel spreadsheet there as well. Hopefully it serves as a little bit of a reminder to get that back to us. Every time you deliver a CART training, you're required to have all the participants complete an online evaluation, and in return, we provide you with a customized training report to help identify strengths and weaknesses. As we use SurveyMonkey to collect those evaluations, we're able to provide you with a link so you can see your individual training responses. We will provide you with a unique link every time you train. Please do not reuse a link from a previous training program. Once you register your training with us with that training request form, which is also on the CD as I mentioned, you will get a specific link that is unique to you. It'll also have a class number which will be unique to that particular training. And so just don't reuse it for something else. If you decided you didn't have enough people participate and you're going to cancel the class and then reuse it, and then you're going to reschedule it, get in contact with us so we can change dates in our Access database. Because what will happen is we may decide at that point, do we want to close that evaluation and give you a new one? Because every time that we create an evaluation, we set up a closing date of which that evaluation will be locked and no longer able to be entered into. And so if you're scheduling it for over a month out, we may need to just give you a whole new number and evaluation link. So those are the expectations that we have from trainers. What CCAR agrees to is to send all trainers any updates to the curriculum, so you'll always have the ability to work with the latest version. CCAR will inform you of any ongoing education or training opportunities as it relates to your ability to professionally deliver this curriculum. We will not sell our curriculums. In order to deliver a CART training, one must attend the training and the accompanying TOT program. Each training comes with 1 hour of technical assistance prior to an event and 1 hour of technical assistance post-event. Additional phone or on-site technical assistance may be purchased. So really, I don't charge to talk to people on the phone. I would rather you get in touch with me if you have any questions about the curriculum. I have no problem taking some time if a question comes up during a training, make a point to contact me at lunch or in the evening before you meet again with your folks. I have no problem with that. I don't charge for anything like that. The only time we would charge is if we had to go to your site and help train, if you wanted us to come on site to help you set up something specifically. But as far as phone calls go, I don't charge for that piece. So that's an overview of the trainer's agreement. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I covered? It is something that I do ask you to sign, so I would like to make sure that you're all set before I move on. Okay, wonderful. All right, great. Then let's move on to the curriculum. So the other thing I want to let you know is we do have our own CART website. It's addictionrecoverytraining.org. If you go to /TOTs, that's where you can go to register your training and get that information to download and send back to us. Information on ordering books is there. Any trainer frequently asked questions we put there. So please definitely go to that page, take a look at it, bookmark it. All of the information is there. Again, I put Lizanne's information down. She is pretty much your resource here to set up trainings, to order manuals, and anything that comes in between, really. And her number, which rings when you call the main CART line at 860-218-9553, or her email address is Lizanne. Notice there's no hyphen, it's just LIZEANNE@ccar.us. Also, the other piece that I want to just make everybody clear about is that when somebody completes one of our training programs, they do get a certificate of attendance, which provides them with, for this one in particular, 12 CEUs. That is not the same as certifying somebody. Certification is done through local certification boards. If you're not sure what certification is in your state, you can go to this website at the ATTC network. They're wonderful. They have a listing of every single certification for the entire country. I would suggest, because people are going to ask this in your training, to have an idea of what the process is for becoming certified. If there is certification, people are going to want to know what next steps are. You know, right now they're going to take this and be like, so can I be a recovery coach in an emergency department? It depends on the program that is running that specific emergency department program, you know, what agency is doing it and what the requirements are. You know, job requirements for recovery coaches are different from state to state, agency to agency. And so if you have a good understanding of what jobs are available or what the steps are for certification, it just gives you that much more of an ability to be able to ask those questions when they come up, because they will come up. So right now in Connecticut, we do have a local Connecticut certification board, and you know, there are some jobs that require somebody to be certified. There are some that don't. Maybe they just require them to go through the CCAR 30-hour training program, and then they'll figure out the rest with that person once they get on staff. This 12-hour curriculum isn't a substitute for that 30-hour main basic understanding of recovery coaching. This is a supplemental training, and so it can be used for certification if people want to use it to get their specific amount of hours. I know in Connecticut we need 50. Usually they want at least the full 30 of the RCA first, and then these other trainings are basically supplemental to make up additional hours or for recertification. Usually certification, at least the original one, is for 2 years, and then after that people have to become recertified. And so this may be able to help them with that piece. Perfect, Ruth. Thank you. It is very painless in Connecticut. We have a pretty good certification board. It's very cut and dry. I know, Ruth, you oversee some of the process in New York at the ASAP through the New York Certification Board, but I do know that there are some states out there that are still trying to figure some of that piece out. So I definitely want to make sure that people have a basic understanding. Again, it's just a good idea of it as a trainer to have that information, because people will ask. It comes up all the time as to what are my next steps and am I certified if I go through this? And the answer is no, you're not certified unless you've gone through that process with your local certification board. I see Mike is typing, so I just want to give him a chance to. Perfect. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you being that resource for folks. I do know, like I said, it is pretty painless. I think sometimes it's just a matter of understanding where to get the information, which trainings are covered, you know, all that fun stuff. So at this point, let's move on. The other piece, just to make you all aware of, is we do have our Recovery Coach Professional designation because people have kind of looked at CCAR as the gold standard for training. You know, we've decided to have this as something that people can use, especially for those states that don't have a certification. This is a good alternative. And so I just pointed out there because obviously these 12 hours can be used towards that process. And again, additional support. I always try to leave this up a couple of times because people always need to get in touch with Lizanne. So on to the curriculum. All of our trainings were developed with the principles behind adult learning theory, which states that adults are internally motivated and self-directed. Adults bring life experiences and knowledge to their learning experiences. Adults are goal-oriented. Adults are relevancy-oriented, adults are practical, and they like to be respected. So in the same way that we want to treat people as resources, as recovery coaches, we hope to model recovery coaching when we're training. So we want to actively listen to our participants, ask them good questions to prompt responses, and we want to manage our own stuff while treating them all as resources. So this is definitely, even as we're training, we want to remember the fundamentals of recovery coaching. And so let's get into the manual. And again, Ryan, I apologize you don't have this, but this PowerPoint really walks us through everything. So again, you know, you'd be able to kind of be able to take a look at this after the fact and pretty much be right on point. The very first page of the trainer's manual is an overview agenda with timing, page numbers, and slide numbers. This is something that we do for all of our training programs, just to give you a quick overview of how long things should take. Now again, with everything else, the timing that we have is a rough estimate of what we think it should take. Larger classes may take longer, smaller classes may take less time. That's where your art as a trainer will come in, because you'll really need to think about, you know, if I'm already through the introductions of the room and it's only 10 after 9 and I'm really not supposed to be on to the next section till 9:25, you know, then you might need to stretch some things. Maybe ask another question of folks who've come in. But really, that's where it takes your facilitation skills to be able to kind of go through and, you know, kind of step in and make sure that you actually spend the full 12 hours with folks over the 2 days. This is our 2-minute autobiography. We do it at the beginning of every single training program. We ask participants to follow this format. It really helps to keep things in time. You know, I know a lot of times if there's a smaller group, again, you can ask additional questions. You know, has anybody had any experience recovery coaching in an emergency department yet? Is anybody planning on, you know, or working to help develop a program? I mean, you're all trainers, and so you know how to stretch things if you need to, but those are some things that you can add if you have a really small class. And again, that would be somewhere where you could go into this slide and add those things. Let's say if you know you have less than 10 people and it may not take that long to get around the room, use those pieces to kind of stretch this a little bit if you need to. Here are the learning objectives for the Emergency Department Recovery Coaching Program. Participants in this course will describe the roles and functions of the recovery coach working in the emergency department. We want folks to understand and practice staying in their lane. They're going to develop skills to advocate and educate staff and patients as a way to demonstrate accountability within the role. Use of motivational interviewing to bring people through the stages of change into recovery, and to further develop your art of recovery coaching. And so those are the 5 learning objectives that we hope participants will go away with once they've completed the course. Here's the agenda for day 1. Again, a welcome to the program and introductions. along with an overview of the program, as well as our trainer expectations of working agreements. The first module is accountability. We break down recovery coach roles. We look at a emergency department recovery coach job description. We have time set aside for lunch. Also journaling, which is something that we do every time we come back at the end of lunch. We have the second part of the EDRC job description. We have a piece on staying in your lane, and then we look at language of recovery. Again, this is the slide that we do at the end of going around the room and looking at folks to provide us with what it will take to create a safe environment. And these are really our expectations. A willingness to allow each person to share without fear of judgment or ridicule, an open-mindedness towards fellow members' beliefs and opinions, a readiness to be vulnerable about your beliefs and attitudes, an enthusiastic hope that we'll all complete this program wiser and more accepting than when we started. And we really think that this is a good idea to begin using this model when you work with recoveries, actually setting up what are the working agreements that we are going to have on the table when we're working together. One of the pieces that we added to this training program were some slides that really kind of help demonstrate a module or a feeling about a module that we're going to cover. And we wanted the voice of our CCAR emergency department recovery coaches in the room because we know that they're actually doing the work. They're the ones that are in the emergency departments. They're the ones that have had these experiences. So I gave them all a questionnaire about what they've been experiencing, and some of these quotes were their direct answers to those pieces. And so you'll see with this slide for accountability, Jay, who is now actually our ED recovery coach manager, but also serves as a recovery coach, his biggest fear going into the ED for the first time had to do with the hospital staff and how they would interact with our team. Would we be welcomed in, viewed as additional resources, professionals, or would we be seen as being in the way and somehow devalued? I think you'll see that some of these quotes really get to the essence of what it is that we are trying to get to when we look at the module on accountability. So with this first small group activity on accountability, we ask, as an emergency department recovery coach, how would you answer the following? And you'll see that graphic is cutting off, but that's only so I could add the words at the bottom. It doesn't do that on the actual PowerPoint that you have. So we want folks to ask, who are you accountable to? How do you demonstrate that accountability? And how could you rank that list? So this is, again, we want there to be a small group activity that we then create a larger list for comments by the full group. There are some guiding questions, as you can see, but we really want people to understand the huge amount of groups that we impact in the role. One of those things is who is watching us, who is waiting to see this emergency department recovery coaching thing fail, perhaps, or who is looking to see us succeed. Who are we serving? Is it the recovery? Is it the family? Is it the hospital? Is it the agency that we're serving? And so we really want to make sure that everybody has a really good understanding that when they're performing the role of recovery coach in the emergency department, there are many eyes on us, and we are accountable to all of them. Any questions about that activity regarding accountability? There's, a couple more slides, but I just want to make sure as far as that actual small group, it's not changed from when we did it way back when we piloted it, but I want people to understand the importance of this piece. Is everybody pretty good? Okay. from there, we give a definition of accountability as an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. And again, we might ask a closing question of, why is it so important in our work as recovery coaches in an emergency department to be accountable or to understand what accountability is? Again, just a couple of slides on the impact of us being in the emergency rooms. Again, we want people to understand that not only, yes, we're accountable, but also that because we're there, we have a huge impact on the staff. They look at us and they're starting to see a really huge shift in how the culture is changing and how they're reacting to people who come in with these needs. And some of it might be because our coaches are there to take the burden off of them, or our coaches are there to help educate and advocate for them. And so again, it's really one of those huge pieces that because we're not just serving the hospital or the recovery or the or the family members, we're really serving everybody, that we really are starting to build those bridges. And that's the impact that we're seeing. So from there, we go into recovery coach roles. And what we'd like for folks to do is to look at the different roles of the recovery coach and think about, the role of the recovery coach in the emergency department. And so if you remember, this is something where we looked at ranking each of the roles. There was like a, if you had to rank them in order, which ones would be your top 5. And then what we do is we kind of do an assessment with the whole group to figure out, what the top 5 are, just to kind of, maintain our focus. Obviously we don't have all day to spend, but we really want to just look at what the top 5 recovery coach roles come into play when we're serving in the emergency department. And again, this could be one of those things where everything comes into play, but we really want to look at those top 5 key roles. And then in small groups, we give folks the opportunity to really look at developing a list of tasks and skills that go along with each of those 5 roles. So we ask for folks to identify a recorder and a reporter for this small group activity. We want them to list the 5 roles that were identified in the full group, and then think about working as an ED recovery coach, what skills or tasks would be listed under each of these roles. And this is really something that we want people to think about to really help define what it might look like when working in an emergency department. I mean, because really it may look very different than volunteering in, recovery community center and things such as that. So we really want people to think about, if you had to be that motivator and cheerleader, what would those tasks and skills be for someone working in an emergency department? Any questions about that piece at all? Okay, then I will keep going. So again, this is another slide that we use just to tie the whole thing together, and basically gives kind of an overview of what the recovery coaches are doing in the emergency departments. From there, we ask each of the small groups to think about a job description. What would that job description for an emergency department recovery coach look like? And so if there is time prior to the activity, this is where you could have people stand up, stretch a little bit, think about their biggest takeaway. But it would be really cool to have people break off into groups of 3 or 4 for this next section, and then give them the instructions just to kind of shake up the groups a little bit, especially because there might be people who've come in from one particular program and have all been sitting together in the morning, and so their job description may be already built for them. So we want to split that up. We want to shake things up a little bit and really get some opportunity to get some perspectives, from all around the room. And so we give, the remainder of the time for this activity is, let's see, about 30 minutes for folks to really dive in and think about what that program would look like. What would that job description look like? And we want folks to write, and we have it here in the manual, write a position summary, what the qualifications are, and what the responsibilities are. So we really want them to really think deeply about this piece. And then from there, they go to lunch. After lunch, again, we spend some time journaling, and then we really want people to report out the work product from the last module. So we want each of the groups to, again, if they've selected their reporter, they can share their position summary, their qualifications, their responsibilities. And then we can have a conversation to really kind of look at, what are things that people have shared, what are the things, maybe they haven't brought up that you as a trainer notice, that you can ask, did anybody think about this, or did anybody think about this piece? We also have in the back of the participant manual CCAR's job description, so you can share that with folks as well. We didn't put it within the manual because we don't want people to see it and just start copying from it, taking the easy way out. But again, it could be something that you review depending on how much time you have. You can have different people read different sections to get through that piece. Any questions about any of that? Wonderful. So the next piece we go into is staying in your lane. We really want to remind folks that sometimes the boundaries may not seem so clear, especially for the people that are requesting us. And so we want people to understand that a recovery coach is not a social worker, not a clinician, not a nurse, not a doctor, not a pharmacist, not clergy. And so there is a document in the manual, the Staying in Your Lane document, which gives the characteristics for the counselor, recovery coach, and sponsor for different pieces, so that we can really demonstrate how recovery coaches stay in their lane. And so this is one of those pieces that recovery coaches may be like, oh yeah, I totally got it. But I think when we're working in an emergency department and people see us in a medical setting, sometimes people aren't always clear on what our role is. So we need to make sure that we are very clear about our role. People may ask us about medications, and we're in a medical setting. It may seem very natural that they may ask us about that. And we just have to make sure that we understand where our boundaries are and not give advice, not give any, feedback about dosages or what we think is the best thing for somebody. I mean, again, we're there to help connect people to their next step. Whatever that next step may be is up to them. And so we really shouldn't be forcing people to one thing or another. This is something that we want to make sure that recovery coaches stay true to the spirit of the role. I know a lot of times when people are putting programs together, the people who are writing these programs may not always be familiar with what a recovery coach does. Recovery coach is like the hot thing to have in some of these settings, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily know how to utilize them. And so that's where we need to, as recovery coaches, educate and advocate to make sure that we aren't being asked to overstep what we know are our boundaries. If somebody asks us, hey, can you go ahead and do this assessment when you're meeting with this person so we can, we're not junior case managers. We're not there to, do any of those pieces. That already damages the effect that a recovery coach can have on somebody. And so, we're not going to be able to connect to that person if they see us coming in a lab coat and a checkboard and everything else. That's going to totally negate the beauty of what a recovery coach can do. And so we really want to make sure that not only are we performing in the role that we're there to perform, that the people who are building the programs understand what our role is. And so that's part of educating and advocating in this role in working in an emergency department. So, and this is again, we want folks to, in small groups, think about how recovery coaches could veer out of their lanes. What are the pieces that somebody could do that could potentially come, and be something that may present some boundary issues for us. And so we want people to really write down some, individual thoughts on this, and then have some small group discussions and brainstorm a large list that we can then share as a large group. Any questions about that piece? And then the way to kind of tie this all together is really to kind of think about, what could be our supports that we might use? What could be, ways that we could, think about coming back and making sure that we're on point? Again, this is one of those things that we can use these two questions to kind of wrap this piece up. If people think about the worst case scenario, well, how likely is that going to happen, and how do we get back? How do we assure ourselves that we're not going to step into dangerous territory? And what are those pieces? Is it our supervisor? Is it a program manager? Is it our team? And really make sure that we understand all of that. So the last piece of the day is really language of recovery. And so this is, again, another transition slide about the challenges that some of our emergency department recovery coaches were facing. And so we understand that hospital staff have compassion fatigue, and so some of the way that they speak about recoveries, even our recovery coaching staff, may be pretty ugly, and so again, as advocates as well as ambassadors, how do we get people to change the way they talk about recovery? And part of that is by us using language that is positive and changing the way people speak about addiction and recovery in these different settings. And so we want people to think about and really come up with a list of terms in their small groups that we should discard, and a list of terms to use when speaking about recovery that could change some attitudes. And again, it's just a matter of having these things out there so that when people are feeling like, wow, this person keeps using this derogatory term, where's my toolbox? And so I can have a conversation, and what is a way that I might get them to use a different term, And so we really want people to understand not only, how powerful language is, but also to think about, that sometimes it's our language that really prevents people from even coming forward to get help, because they know that there's a stigma attached. And if you look at even being treated in hospital settings, sometimes it's, there's forms of neglect where people had to wait longer. They receive less care or attention. I always talk about, Thanks, Ruth. I always talk about how when I worked at Bristol Hospital, there was a time where anybody that came in that was going to be sent up to inpatient were given these bright purple, Barney purple Johnnies to wear so that the ED emergency room staff didn't knew that they didn't have to bother with those people that they were going upstairs to inpatient. Talk about stigma. Talk about, all of these things. It was clear, obviously, that that policy didn't happen, and that practice didn't last very long. I think a matter of 2 weeks before scathing articles were written. But I do think that there is definitely some truth, and that's why recovery coaches are put in order to help bridge the gap, to remove those barriers. And so this is definitely one of those pieces that we want people to understand, that again, we are always educating and advocating not only for our recoveries, but for the recovery movement in general. And so I think it's a really big hat that we wear. And so we really want people to understand it, know that this may be something that they're going to have to go in and really do their best to be able to kind of combat some of these things when they're working in busy, chaotic emergency rooms. Any questions about that piece or the point of that module? Perfect. So we use this slide to close that whole piece, and then we move on to skits. So what we want to do is we want there to be an opportunity for each of the groups to come up with a situation where the attitudes about a recovery is extremely negative. And so what we want to see is, having the recovery coach come in and getting, being in the middle of this extremely negative situation, and then turning it around. What does the recovery coach do to get everybody to kind of, flip that negativity into positivity in order to help that recovery? And so this is really the final module of the day, so that everybody kind of understands, how we've come through, from really that accountability. So now this is going to demonstrate that by a recovery and a recovery coach working with different people, because again, everybody in every group should have a role, even if it's not a speaking role. So you'll have, the nurse maybe is involved, the doctor, could be any staff involved in this situation. And so it really goes to show all those different pieces, the hats that the recovery coach wears, how to stay out of, how to stay in their lane, as well as how to turn around negative language. And so it really gives an opportunity to demonstrate all of the learning that we've had so far. And then at the end of the day, once that piece is done, we have our usual time for questions and comments, and then we review pluses and wishes. Are there any questions that I can answer about day one, or is there any particular module that somebody might find difficult to facilitate? Perfect. That's what we try to do. We try our best to make sure that you have all the tools that you need, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Plus, you guys have all been through this, and it's been some time since you've attended, so I'm hoping that it's pretty much in line with how you were trained. So let's move on to day two and really start looking at how that day is laid out. Again, if you go to the trainer's manual, you'll see that there is a day two timing grid with, again, each of the modules laid out with the amount of minutes that each module should take, if there's page numbers, if there's slides to go through. Everything's all laid out for you. so that you are able to have an overview of where you're going. In the beginning of the day, just like all of our other trainings, we use an opportunity with our huddles and mingles to go through and do a review of the previous day's content. And so this is really an opportunity to, have that opportunity to talk about, like, and I think we have it laid out on page 20 in your trainer's manual. These are any of the topics you can use, accountability, recovery coach roles, staying in your lane, language, your first time in an emergency department. Any of those things you can use to kind of generate some conversation and also carry over from the day before. Also, if there was something that maybe like was a hot topic from the day before, use this time to kind of continue that conversation. But again, we really want to spend some time doing this because it reinforces the learning from yesterday, bringing it into the day that we are going into on day 2. So again, before we get started, once everybody's up in their huddles and mingles, even those who are sitting down, take an opportunity to get people to stand up, line up by any particular way that you want them to, so that you can get them into new table groupings for the day. It's a really good idea to kind of mix this group up a couple of different ways during the 2 days, only because, as I said, there might be people who come from already working in an emergency department and people who are learning to work in an emergency department, and shifting the groups really helps provide an opportunity to everybody to work with different people and get some of those different perspectives, especially when they're working in small groups. We go through the day 2 agenda as we do on every morning, just to remind, we know that adults like to know what they're going to cover, and so this gives that opportunity to kind of lay out the day. We have the acquaintance and the review, an overview of the program. We also review the working agreements. We look at motivational interviewing, stages of change. We also have that opportunity to have lunch. We have time set aside for journaling, how we help developing your art, and then continued professional development goals. And as I said, we go through the working agreements one more time just to make sure that we don't need to renegotiate anything. I always ask, how does everybody think we did? Is there anything we need to renegotiate? This last time I did a 2-day TOT and we had to renegotiate, or not renegotiate, but we had to add side conversations, because obviously people start chit-chatting and then other people can't hear. I thought it was great that somebody else from the group actually brought up, we need to, make sure we're paying attention. Only one person speaks at a time. And so that was something that came from the group, that if we didn't take the time to review and give an opportunity, we might have missed that piece. If you remember from doing the piece, or when we did this piece, when we all met, we took some time to really look at motivational interviewing. And this is the piece where we want to give an overview of motivational interviewing and provide a summary of each principle. And so we go through express empathy, what it means to do that. It might be a good idea to break this up, have different people read each slide, but we go through develop discrepancy. What does that look like? We look at what avoiding argument is. We look again at supporting self-efficacy, and then roll with resistance or dance with discord. So this is really something that we kind of go through and take some time to really provide this quick overview for folks. Because what we want people to do is go through each station and write their own sample statements and questions under each principle. And so we have a station for each of the 5 motivational interviewing principles around the room. and you can break people up if you need to count off into different numbers to make sure that there's an equal amount in front of each easel pad. Feel free to do that. But this is where we want people to really use their art and tell us, what are the questions that they would use in order to develop discrepancy. What are the pieces that they would say to somebody if they're trying to, support some self-efficacy? What are the things that they might say to somebody to avoid argument? So this is really where we want folks to throw those sample statements up on these boards. And really this provides with, each of the recovery coaches in the room an opportunity to practice, but also to share what works with them. And for those who maybe don't have a lot of experience can kind of go through and be like, oh, wow, I never would have thought about asking somebody that question. And so one of the other ways that you can do this if space is tight is to maybe, you rotate pads as opposed to having people get up and do each of the stations. So it's really however you want to do it. But I think the real key to this is to give the opportunity for folks to walk around the room, to have that opportunity to list what their sample statements are, and to give some time when everything's done to actually review them. Any questions about any of that piece? Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. And then again, we kind of go through and just report out and then also review what the sample statements and questions were during the RCA. So this is just another good way to kind of re-emphasize the learning, and if, there were some things, that people were still having a hard time about, this is where we can offer these different statements and questions. And Dorian, I see you're typing. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And then once we're done with this piece, we move into stages of change. So this is where we speak about how quickly the time is to move those we serve in an emergency department quickly through the stages. We may meet them at the very beginning of this process. And for this module, what we want participants to think and write out are the tasks for each stage that a recovery coach working in an emergency department would need to do to move somebody from one stage to the next. So if you remember, in the RCA, we had that wonderful table that was written out, and so we gave everybody kind of that, I think it was like a chart. And so in the book for this time, what we do is we leave that last column empty. And so if we look at in the participant manuals on page 23, if we looked at the stage of pre-contemplation, and we look at the common characteristics and we look at what a recovery needs to do, we want to know what a recovery coach would do. So how would a recovery coach move somebody from pre-contemplation to contemplation when working in an emergency department? And we do that in small groups for each of the 5 stages. And so again, we really want people to understand that this may be something that is a little different than when you're working with somebody who comes in and says, I need some help with my recovery. Oh, okay, well, let's, do you want to talk to a coach? There's some less critical-ness about it. If somebody's coming into a recovery community center, let's say, when somebody's coming into an emergency department, we may be moving them from contemplation to action all within, a very short amount of time. So we as coaches really need to know and have an idea of how we are going to do that. Any questions about that piece and moving people from one to the next, and what people need to do in that module? Great. So from there, we're already at lunch. And so we provide, again, another time to do some journaling, and we provide another opportunity for some huddles and mingles. Because we, again, want people in new table groups, we're moving them around all the time with this one. So this is the next part where we actually talk about moving from pathways to recovery to pathways of recovery. And so we really want to ask some of these very pointed questions about what our goals are in an emergency department recovery coach role. Like, what is it that we want people to do? How do we, what's the main objective of the emergency department? We need to understand the bigger picture and then really kind of tease out, like, what is our goal? And what have we learned so far that will help us achieve that? And then how do we connect people to recovery? And then how do we move from resistance to opportunity? Because a lot of times we know that there's going to be some resistance to our role, to how we perform our role. It may not seem, it may seem a little out of the box for people. So how do we handle those things? And so from there, we really want people to think about some of the hats they're wearing as a recovery coach. So this is where we go through and we really look at advocating, motivator and cheerleader, and resource broker. Now, these are the three roles that we decided to focus on. There may be other roles that have kind of come up from the beginning of the training where we came up with our top 5. But really, when we looked at working with our recovery coaches, these are really the huge pieces that they need to tackle in order to get somebody quickly through from contemplation to action. Obviously you got to be that motivator and cheerleader. You got to advocate not only for that recovery and figure out what they want to do, but then you might have to advocate to the social worker who has to sign off on it. Maybe you have a strong group of family members that are really kind of hesitant to go along with somebody, so you have to advocate. Then you really have to be that resource broker and figure out, if that person wants to go back into the community and do, and just do some outpatient things, or maybe they want to go and they want to attend meetings. We really need to make sure that we have all of our resources at the ready so that recovery is set up for success. And so these are some things that we just want to kind of dive a little bit deeper in to make sure that people understand what it means to be these 3 roles in an emergency department. And so we first look at a slide on advocate, and we give some people really some time again to think about these things. And if you look at page 27, 28, and 29, we give people an opportunity to kind of go through and think about the role of recovery coach as an advocate and answer some very pointed questions. So how do you see yourself working in the role as advocate in the emergency department? Who are you advocating to? And what might you need to do to get buy-in from hospital staff, the local community, etc.? So that's the first piece. Then we look at motivator and cheerleader. A motivator and cheerleader. What are ways you can motivate someone you're meeting in the emergency department for the first time? What can you do to inform, encourage, and support family members who may also be present during this meeting? How do you wear that hat? What are the things that you can do? Again, we really want people to start, yes, having the outline of the recovery roles is kind of the science behind it, but how we use those roles, how we use the science of stages of change is our art. And so that's what we want people to start getting at, because we've really been practicing this whole time. We're not just feeding people information, we really want to get them to think about that next level. How are they putting this into practice? So the next piece in the resource broker might be, what are the biggest barriers to recovery? How might you overcome those barriers? And how do you decide which resources to make referrals to? So again, we go through and really kind of ask some very pointed questions about the role of resource broker. And then we ask folks to practice with some role plays. And so this is number one. A recovery you're meeting with is thinking about going to a treatment program you're recommending. In order to secure his placement, you need to get clearance from the social worker to approve the transfer. This social worker has seen this recovery several times and isn't convinced he will see this through. How do you persuade the social worker? So this is an opportunity to have, and somebody kind of think about, what is it that we just looked at? How do I advocate? How do I provide resources to this person? What do I need to do to get this person what they're looking for? And then the next one is the recovery is concerned about what to tell their family who's been waiting outside, and how can you help the recovery with this process? How do you motivate him? How do you help him advocate for himself? Again, looking at those hats that we've really kind of dove a little deeper into, what are the things that you're going to bring to these conversations to help that recovery get what it is that he needs to get to the next point? And so that's a way that we use role play to kind of give that opportunity to practice. Any questions about that piece? Wonderful. So from there's an afternoon break, and then when we come back, we really want people to, again, as I started to state in the last piece, we want them to understand that recovery coaching requires art and science. So the science is what we do, and the art is kind of how we do it. And kind of somewhere in the middle of that is, that curiosity factor. And this is where, obviously, if people want to learn more, that's when they're going to go and do more professional development. How am I going to fine-tune my craft? And that's where these classes come in. Talking to other people on their team may come in. This is where people may have to step up and really kind of think about, how am I going to develop my art? And so one of the things that we give people to do to kind of think about this, after we kind of go through these two slides about, science and art, is Phil had a blog that he talks about the art of recovery coaching back from February of this year. And so what we want people to do is read the blog, which is on page 30 in the manual. And then we want people to think about, what are their thoughts about the art of recovery coaching. And so then from there, we ask people to individually think about what are the gifts that they bring, or what are their gifts, what do they bring to the role, and how would they define their art. And then from there, again, because we want people to really think about improving themselves even beyond this, is how will I practice my art? And so there's a way to write a SMART goal in order to kind of go through that piece and really think about what is it that I need to do in order to continue developing myself and my art of recovery coaching. So we share this slide that gives specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, so people remember what a SMART goal is. And we give them about 10 minutes to kind of go through and write a goal, and then take some time to share that with a partner. One of the pieces that I've been finding most recently, even when I trained the RCA, and I had this come up over the last TOT, it's like with the stages of recovery and people kind of getting bogged down by the time frames that are within those. And I keep telling people, especially now that we're really looking at, the science and the art and that they're different, and the framework that's presented is science. It's based on experience, it's based on, a group of time, a group of participants. This was something that a nurse came forward and said she noticed that people in this time frame were experiencing this, and people in this time frame were experiencing that. How we utilize that framework, how we utilize that science is the art. If I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I'm not going to throw that piece of science at them and say, oh, well, you're not going to feel real fulfillment in recovery till you reach 20 years. That's not using it in a way that really is the art of recovery coaching. I may need to go back and think about, maybe I just want to have that information so that when I'm meeting somebody first new in recovery, I know why they're still asking a lot of questions, because they're still learning about it. Maybe I use that science when I'm meeting with a family member, so the family member doesn't have high expectations. Again, it's all about the art of recovery coaching. There's a bunch of science out there, like with the stages of change. That's a framework. That's something we can borrow from. How we utilize that, how we move people through it, is our art. And so we really want people to kind of think about those pieces. And really, when you think about it, that's why a lot of our trainings are done in person. Anybody can go through and flip through these manuals and get through them in probably, a couple of hours. Maybe the RCA, obviously, a little bit more. But meeting together, having these conversations, that's how we practice and that's how we develop our art. It's a very different thing from reading an article to actually reacting to it, learning from it, hearing from other people how they reacted to it. That's how we fine-tune our art. And so that's what we really want people to understand, when they come to these trainings. That's what we're looking at. So what would be a smart goal for somebody to really look at developing their art of recovery coaching once they've attended this training program, or maybe what they need to do next? Any questions about that piece? Oh, I'm so glad, Tyrell. I find it comes up for me more and more to have to kind of remind people that this is science, and how we use it is really the art of it. So thanks. I appreciate that. So Phil actually wrote a blog, but that was by Phil. But yeah, art is really like, he lives in the art of recovery coaching, like he is definitely that person who is so, always thinking about how he connect to people, what is it about the person. Again, if you look back at this slide here, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's all art. These slides and the way, no, I know, but these slides, that's really, he's really one of those people that kind of pushes it. But yeah, he is really kind of the mastermind behind all of this, because the way that he kind of looks at things is very much an art. For a while we were going to call it art instead of cart, but that would have gotten really, really confusing for folks. So from this piece, we share kind of like an overall couple of slides just to bring it to a close, and then we remind people about the evaluation piece, which again, for those of you who are trainers already, this is one of those pieces that we typically get the most phone calls about. So if you can take the time to just walk people through this, share, the information on page 34, give them their class number, tell them to type this into a web browser, and then to wait 2 hours before they go to recoverycoachacademy.us. It would be extremely helpful, because a lot of times I know at the end of 2 days, people are just ready to get out the door. But we really need them to not be dismissed until this information is covered. We'll have people who, I didn't know I needed a class number, who start taking SurveyMonkey.com evaluations about light bulbs and then don't understand why they didn't get a certificate. So this is definitely one of those pieces where we really need the help of the trainers to make sure that we have participants understanding this piece. And again, if there are still questions, more than fine, send them along to us. We have no problem. It's just the as much as you can do to help us with this process, to review it in your classes, rather than just throwing out the class number and say, look on page 34, all the instructions are there, you're dismissed, would just be a huge help. So before we dismiss, I want you to think again about the different modules we covered, and if there's an area that you're feeling unsure about. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And then also any concerns for delivering the curriculum, and if there's any way that we can support you as trainers better. So I'm just going to kind of keep those questions up and see if you all have any comments about the three of those. Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Tyrell. So the one thing that I just want to remind you, thank you, Doreen, is remind you, thank you, guys. I appreciate that. What I want you to just remember is to get me your trainer's agreement, however you want to get it to me. If you want to fax it to me, our fax number is 860-244-2228. If you want to email me, you can do that as well at Stacy, S-T-A-C-Y, @ccard.us. And what I'll do is, like I said, when I stop recording, I'm going to go through and create the link for this so I can send it to you all, and make sure you have it along with the reminder to get that training agreement back to me. Once I receive your training agreement, we will process it and send you a certificate and put you in our database as an authorized trainer of this curriculum. Any final questions before we bid a fond farewell? Going once, going twice. Oh, so Doreen, so what I'm going to do is, hold on one second, Tyrell. What I'm going to do is send everybody an email with all this, with the recording in it, as well as a reminder to send us back the the trainer agreement. Once I have that agreement, I will send you your certificate that states that you're an authorized trainer of this curriculum. As well, then we will also mark you in our database. And Tyrell, did you have something that you wanted to say? Oh, yeah, I do have a breakout of the CEUs by domain that I can put in that email for you. Absolutely. Let me write myself a note to do that. Yep, I'll send that to all of you. Okay, Doreen, thank you. I'll do that for everybody. As far, I'll remind you about sending in your trainers agreement. I'll send the recording of this, and then I'll also send that list of CEUs by domain. And if you have any other questions, you know how to reach me. Feel free to get in touch with me anytime. Any of our CART staff is more than willing to help and happy to help anytime you need it. So I look forward to hearing how it goes. Really excited that you're all coming on board to train this. It's a really fun training curriculum. I hope you all enjoyed it. And again, I'm sure I will talk to you all soon. Yes, I can do that too, Doreen. I can get you the copy of these slides as well. Perfect. All right. Goodbye, all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'm sure I will talk to you soon.